I think one of the biggest problems we're facing today is that people are not okay with a difference of opinion or belief. And to be fair, there are some beliefs that are like really fucking out there, right? Like believing in Bigfoots. Big feets? What is the plural of that?
Hey, little mama, you know what they say about big feet?
Yeah. They don't exist. Some ideas are utterly ridiculous, like the existence of Sasquatches and the idea that our world is run by satanic child trafficking lizard people from outer space. But even when it comes to some of the real world concerns, like to what extent can our governing entities be trusted, people aren't even willing to try on the idea hat. And we have no tolerance for people who have a different view of this than we do, right? If you don't trust certain federal bodies, you are a Trump-worshipping, anti-science conspiracy theorist, and you are hitherto banished from Twitter. If you do trust these federal bodies, then you are a compliant sheep that is stupid enough to depopulate themselves. There's no winning here, is there? No matter what you do, you're doing it wrong. We paint these outlandish caricatures of the other side, right? The right is anti-woman, anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-Semitic, and doesn't care if Black people and children die by gun violence. The left is anti-masculinity, anti-God, mentally ill, hypersexual, totalitarian, and doesn't care if babies die. And look, I know that all families are dysfunctional, but like, is this the best we can do, America? Is this the best we can do, humanity? Someone file for divorce! Where is the political party that loves people from all walks of life and doesn't trust the fucking system? Marco! I want to be part of that political party because that's where the party's at. You know what I'm saying, baby? As a society, we are more polarized than ever, and it's coming to a boiling point. Like, can you feel it, Mr. Krabs? Which is why people want to paint other people from head to toe as like Team Red or Team Blue. Personally, I'm like ultraviolet with a metric fuck ton of sparkles, but whatever. And it's gotten to the point where it's like so bad that people on either side can't even have a conversation about these things, right? Someone learns like one belief you hold and they think they know your whole story. We don't give each other any grace. There's no grace. There's no curiosity about other people's viewpoints, no seeking to explore and understand and exchange ideas. Just judgment. I have a friend that you'll sometimes see in the comments. His name is Remnant, and he said something really lovely the other day, which is that he does not go into a conversation wanting to win. And in fact, when he loses, he's actually learned something, and it gives him the opportunity to think and to integrate what he learned to create a new understanding. And I was like, wow, if only we could all be so wise and humble as Remnant, but we're not. Basically, other people's beliefs feel like a personal attack on us. That brazen whore! She had an opinion, and I took that personally. And in fact, now, if you raise like even a legitimate concern, like, hey, it seems like, you know, some of the people in power might be, pedophiles. People will just write you off as a flat earther who believes that humans never landed on the moon. I think people are waking up to the terrifying reality of child trafficking, but like historically, if you were to say something like, there's an elite circle of high net worth individuals who pay to rape children, you would have been tossed in a loony bin, right? Like that was the furthest extreme of conspiracy theory. And today, like, we got questions. But you say something that may have some legitimacy and you can still be written off as a conspiracy theorist. Now, the word conspiracy theory was coined by the CIA when they were accused of assassinating JFK. And 60 years later, them assassinating JFK may not actually be a conspiracy theory, even in the eyes of the mainstream. It's a reasonable suspicion. The CIA is, after all, an organized mafia that spends a lot of time killing brown people in foreign countries and running disinformation, brainwashing, and propaganda campaigns on the American people. And that's not a conspiracy theory either. That is something that is public knowledge. It's something they have historically done and either owned up to or been exposed for. we're just told they don't do that anymore, right? That was like the 60s, 80s, whatever. That was their bad boy phase. As the old adage goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice and like, oh my God, you would never. I love this chart because I think it's a pretty accurate reflection of how most people perceive these topics, right? Conspiracy theories exist on this spectrum of credibility, but for some reason, they unfortunately all get lumped in together as one big bullshit soup. So I appreciate this chart created by disinformation activist Abby Richards because it at least creates some gradation. That being said, even the really like fringe crazy stuff up at the top there, sometimes there's a grain of truth. Okay, itsy bitsy bitsy, but it's there. The New World Order, for example, the New World Order is not a conspiracy theory.
A new world order.
We needed a new world order.
Now, much has been said by the Secretary of State and others about a new world order.
Will be to develop an overall strategy for America in this period when really a new world order can be created. It's a great opportunity.
Forge for ourselves and for future generations. A new world order. The quest for the new world order.
Went to the big guys for the money. I was ready to prostitute myself.
The affirmative task we have now is to actually create a new world order.
An incredible window of opportunity to lead in shaping a new world order.
We've got to accept that this is the new world order.
And the deputies that are pledging allegiance to the new world.
It was a term coined at the end of the First World War to describe an international vision for peace. Now, for reasons we won't go into today, the tinfoil hat people basically have interpreted that vision for peace as being the centralization of global power.
The government says that they want humanity to be one big, safe, happy family, and the government always lies. The government always lies, so what they really mean is they want a globalist, totalitarian regime.
Sounds ridiculous, but there were those infamous conspiracy theory videos that came out in 2012 that addressed the roadmap for this new world order. And even further back, if we look back to the 90s, David Icke was writing about all of this stuff as well. And he's the granddaddy of all conspiracy theories. He's the originator of archons, or reptilian overlords from outer space. They make these outrageous claims like mass forced vaccination, mass surveillance, and militarized police.
Police departments in the St. Louis area, like those across the country, are arming their officers with equipment once on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan.
It's crazy to think that's all happened. And like, but maybe it's not, is the thing. Like, there's a non-conspiratorial explanation for this, which is that the centralization of power is kind of a natural thing, right? You build a business so big it becomes a monopoly. You build a country so big it becomes an empire or a new world order, whatever. And look, like if the new world order were us putting aside our differences and holding hands and singing Kumbaya and flying the Earth flag, like, fuck yeah, I'm here for it. But the concern is that the New World Order is actually like a secret to fascist dictatorship, or at least is the runway for fascism. And in the conspiratorial view of these things, in the tinfoil hat view of these things, oh, excuse me, sir. In the tinfoil hat view of these things, it's this idea that there's a very intentional drive into a dystopian future where the wealth is concentrated in the hands of the very, very few up at the tippity-top, and the rest of us are wallowing in abject poverty at the bottom. I mean, if you ask me, that sounds like a bad Hollywood C film. Who wrote this plot? It has got a bush. I guess it's not impossible that there's like a board of like Dr. Evil villains out there that are plotting world domination. But I find it hard to believe. What I find is a very real possibility is that the centralization of power is sort of just a natural consequence of the cancerous trajectory that power, hubris, and greed often take. When you think about it, every government to ever exist will either crumble or they'll turn fascist, and then they'll crumble. And fascism is the ultimate centralization of power. In America, we like to think that we're immune to these things because we we're that red, white, and blue, and it's all about, freedom. And what a lot of people don't realize is that we have been on the slippery slope to fascism for years, and it has nothing to do with who's in office. It has nothing to do with who's in office, because both Democratic and Republican policymakers have passed the policies that have led us to these points, and then this point. And then the media pits us against one another, and all of the focus is on red versus blue, so that we fail to realize that we have been betrayed by all of the people that are supposed to be serving the public. And they've done that by eroding our rights away over the course of decades. It's a little tactic known as the totalitarian tiptoe. The truth is, it has never been left versus right or red versus blue. It has always been the people versus the establishment, and people just don't realize that's where the fight is. Yet. I think we're getting there. Especially here in America, where we are so quick to trust the government that spies on us through our phone without our permission, goes to war in the name of democracy again and again, but doesn't actually care about poor people, and somehow only ever ends up serving their own financial interests, as history has shown us time and time again.
The decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, too. Anyway.
Has secret torture prisons that aren't so secret anymore, and persecutes journalists who expose how deep the rot and corruption goes. Anyone who has ever touched a history book knows what a red flag that is, right? When journalists, whose job it is to hold authority accountable, when those people are being persecuted for treason and domestic terrorism. Watch out. It's beginning to smell a lot like fascism. So when I hear a politician utter the words New World Order, my question is why? Why would they say that, knowing full well the connotation that carries? Why would any sane person say New World Order, unless they're referring to that centralized global governance system?
No. Big Daddy government doesn't mean it like that. They mean it's a new world, and it's going to be orderly, because everyone picks up their trash after themselves.
So hypothetically speaking, if the world was run by evil globalists, I don't think we would have any idea. I think we would have no clue, because people don't even bat an eye or ask for clarification when a politician refers to the NWO. We have this built-in assumption that can't possibly be what they mean. It can't possibly be, which means that if there is some board of Dr. Evils out there plotting world domination, they can just count on we the people to gaslight ourselves. In the same way, everything outside the commonly accepted narrative, the mainstream narrative, is automatically dismissed as conspiracy theory. It's this knee-jerk reaction in people, as opposed to being curious and open. And I think a lot of that is because it's been so drilled into our head that these people are crazy and we shouldn't associate with them, and we shouldn't go anywhere near those ideas, because then we face exile from the tribe. And so there's a lot of social pressure that keeps people from I think, exploring information that they otherwise would. It has been so drilled into us that these people, they're the problem in the tinfoil hats. Nothing they say has any credibility. They're all crazy. That's why they wear those hats. Those tinfoil hats, to protect them from totally not problematic, definitely safe EMF.
Are you sure about that?
We are 50% sure that we're 100% sure that 5G is not like sticking one's head inside of a microwave. We haven't done many studies on this because we don't want to be wrong, and you can't sue us for what we have no way of knowing. Like how you sued the tobacco companies for the decades they spent knowingly, keyword knowingly, lying to you about the harmful effects of cigarettes. Yep. Spoiler alerts! The story hasn't changed, just the actors.
Does anyone else remember the good old days when bank passports and forced this and medical apartheid, all of that was a conspiracy theory back in March of 2020? I remember those articles. And that's where the joke comes from, right? That the difference between a conspiracy theory and the truth, it's about 6 months, give or take. And I think a great example of that is when the CDC came out and said that would prevent transmission. And people, went onto social media, including medical professionals who have credibility, and they were like, either no, it's not going to prevent transmission, or we don't have the data to prove that it's going to prevent transmission. And so these claims are unfounded. And for that, like, they're branded as conspiracy theorists. People get, kicked off of social media, only for the CDC to come out a few months later and be like, yeah, so it turns out it actually, whoops, it doesn't prevent transmission. And this is the problem with conspiracy theories, right? Is that sometimes they're not conspiracy theories at all. They're really valid perspectives that are just chalked up as being wacky because it's going against what these authorities are saying. And other times, like, conspiracy theories that are outrageous, they're absolutely ridiculous. They have this grain of truth. For example, okay, Pizzagate and Wayfair is in the furthest tier of that disinformation chart, right? The author writes that if you believe in Pizzagate and Wayfair, you are beyond help. You're just unhinged from reality, right? And I'm like, hold up, though. Hold up. There's a grain of truth in this, because we know for a fact that there are elite child trafficking rings, for a fact. We know that there are pedophiles in high places, for a fact. And and this is the part that blows my mind, we are collectively not really doing much about that, for a fact. Ghislaine Maxwell got 20 years in prison for pimping out children to the world's wealthiest? Like, and we still haven't seen the client list? What do you want? Justice system a cookie? And it's one of those things where it's really hard to know how deep that rabbit hole goes, because things are still hidden from us. So much is still hidden from us, like the client list. And even Epstein Island itself, right? Like, that was a big conspiracy theory. Most people were never, ever, 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 ever going to believe that high net worth individuals were paying money to rape children. Like, on what fucking planet can something like that exist, right? It doesn't seem real. How can that possibly be real? And not only that, but how can it exist at the magnitude it did, on the scale that it did, and somehow remain a well-kept secret for years? And today, we all know how true that is. And we still don't know how deep that rabbit hole goes. So people are like, well, are the Clintons part of it? And that sounds outrageous, right? It sounds outrageous. I thought it sounded outrageous until a few weeks ago, when someone who had worked as Bill Clinton's assistant and arranged all of his flights to Epstein Island was found dead, hung from a tree by an extension cord with a shotgun blast to his chest. Can you say overkill? And it was ruled a suicide. He just Epsteined himself, and it wasn't covered by most news outlets, and that's the end of the story. The past 2 years have been like a witch hunt for conspiracy theorists, and it's expanded to include people who don't trust the powers that be, people who have a different perspective, and even people that just have the audacity to ask a damn question. A lot of them have been perfectly reasonable people. Not all of them, okay? Yes, there's some people who are absolutely batshit, I know. But a lot of them have been reasonable, and a number of them have even been medical professionals whose words carry a lot of weight. And yes, there is a very fringe few that believe that, COVID was just a make-believe thing that only existed on TV, and Bill Gates is gonna jab us with a microchip so he can hook us up to central bank digital currency, or turn us into living 5G conductors so we can have better cell service, or whatever the fuck. That bullshit, okay? But it's a very, very fringe few. Needless to say, plenty of things have been called conspiracy theory in the past 2 years, and some of it hasn't been misinformation at all, and some of it has been really freaking crazy with that little grain of truth. Doesn't always have a grain of truth, but sometimes there's a little witsy bitsy grain. Let's talk about two of my favorites.
Number 1, Bill Gates is an evil mastermind. If only he was as warm and fuzzy as his little sweaters. That's what they want you to believe. That Billy G's heart is just so big, he wants to fit the whole world inside it. It's a farce. It is a farce. He is just a space lizard that wants to inject you with aborted baby poison and depopulate the human race. He's not your cuddly uncle. He's a eugenicist.
Look, I can't say with total conviction that it's not true, because I don't know, and nothing would surprise me at this point. But I will say I find it very, very difficult to believe. It's sort of like people took the grain of truth, which is Bill Gates is not trustworthy, and they've taken it to the absolute farthest extreme that they could possibly come up with. The grain of truth is that Bill Gates is not trustworthy, right? This is a man whose main claim to fame in the 90s was being a notorious fraud and liar, and then he had an expensive PR campaign that rebranded him as a philanthropist, and now all of his philanthropic organizations fund the things that he has investments in, which is how philanthropy has made him so rich.
That's what philanthropy is for, kids. Making rich people richer. Yay!
2, these things will cause mass death and destruction, all in the name of a depopulation agenda. Well, look, I don't know what people's definition of mass is, but I think it's worth noting that there have been over 40,000 deaths reported across our global health safety databases. So VAERS, Vigi Access, the Yellow Card system, these public global databases that have historically been used to report adverse events to vaccines. And 40,000 it's unprecedented. Just for context, historically, when a biologic product caused an estimated 50 deaths, it would be pulled from the market.
We knew by January 22nd there was a problem because the U.S. CDC adverse event reporting system had too many deaths that have already happened with the COVID-19 vaccine than they had from all the prior vaccines combined. January 22nd of 2021, the warning bells came off, and then nothing happened. We knew on January 29th through Freedom of Information now, our Center for Disease, our U.S. FDA and Center for Disease Control was supposed to be putting out monthly safety reports for America. No safety report. Lesson learned from this committee, get a safety committee together. Get them together and start having them meet. If you're not seeing safety being provided at a federal level, remember it's safety, safety, safety. It would have been wonderful if these vaccines would have worked, but it was all about safety. We now know through court-ordered documents, Freedom of Information documents, Pfizer knew about 1,223 deaths within 90 days of release of their vaccine. Pfizer knew about it. We don't know if the FDA knew about it. Nobody did anything. And the freight train continued. Now, fast forward, as deaths started to occur, people started to get very, very uncomfortable. And you saw all the pushbacks, protests, all kinds of worldwide feelings of great vaccine hesitancy because people were dying shortly after the vaccine. Papers were published. 50% of the deaths occur within 48 hours, 80% within a week. We know the vaccines installed the genetic material for the Wuhan spike protein that was manipulated in a biosecurity lab in Wuhan, China. There are now 1,000 papers published on the spike protein and 1,000 that deal with vaccine injuries, and they're well characterized. And the FDA agrees. The vaccines cause blood clots. The vaccines cause heart damage. The vaccines cause neurologic damage. They also cause well-characterized immunologic and hematologic system damage. This is in the peer-reviewed literature. This is not equivocal. This is not a subject of controversy or debate. It's in our literature.
On top of that, there's other things that are a little bit strange right now. Like a few life insurance companies have come out and said that they're paying all-time highs in payouts, and said that it is not death by COVID. So as you know, people want to typically attribute these things to the virus, but according to the insurance company that is paying all this money, it was $1.4 billion, which is a lot more than they usually pay. According to them, it is not related to the COVID virus. And on a related note, there is an ex-BlackRock exec who has been analyzing that data from life insurance companies, and he calculates an estimated 60,000 excess deaths among millennials. I haven't seen that data yet, so I don't know if that one is true, but I found that interesting, especially because when this has been shown to people who are very much in support of rollout, they don't even entertain the possibility that it could be attributable to the rollout of this. They want to say that it is a result of overdose or suicide. And what's hard to believe about that is that if you are at a good enough job that they're giving you life insurance, you're probably not doing fentanyl and meth after hours. And I personally find it hard to believe that 60,000 people made a suicide pact. So whatever. I'm just an internet idiot. I don't know. Those links are in the description if you care to rabbit hole.
Hello, beautiful people. I was editing together this video and I realized that I left out something very important, which is the number of adverse events that have been reported. So we touched on the number of deaths across multiple of these databases. And right now, I just want to show you where I'm getting the information for adverse events. So we're going to look at one database called VAERS. It is specific to the United States, and it was set up by the CDC in the 90s. Over its 30-year history, it's had about 1 million adverse reactions reported across all ever. 30 years, okay? Also important to note that they hired some really smart people to figure out how significant the underreporting is in this database. And so they brought some people from Harvard to compare insurance claims to the information in the database. And they found that less than 10% of all adverse events are actually reported to the database. So I'm actually glad that I forgot to mention this in the video, because now I can sit down in front of the computer and show you exactly how to get this. If you go to vaers.hhs.gov, you're going to click on VAERS data. You're going to scroll down and click on Search CDC Wonder. You're going to accept the disclaimer. You're going to go to VAERS Data Search. And up in this top one, Organized Table Layout, you're going to change symptoms to vaccine. Now in the second one, Select Symptoms, you can change this so that you're only looking at things that are life-threatening. You could look at things that are like all cardiac related, whatever. I'm going to leave in all symptoms for the purposes of demonstration. In the third one, we've got select vaccine characteristics, and we are going to select the COVID. And that's the only parameters I'm going to set. This is in the US only. It's all ages, all sexes. There we go. And we're going to hit both sexes. We're going to hit send. It's going to query. And as you can see, there have been almost 1 million reports since the rollout of this, so almost double what has previously existed in there. There is a note at the bottom: submitting a report to VAERS does not mean that healthcare personnel or the vaccine caused or contributed to the adverse events. And that is true. Basically, the way this works is that people are required, but a lot of people don't actually report this. People are encouraged, I guess you could say, to report an adverse event within a specific time frame after they get a vaccination, even if they're not sure whether or not it is attributable to the vaccination. And the reason for this is that one of the ways they're supposed to use this database is to look for trends. And so if we see, wow, 5% of people who are getting this vaccine are getting myocarditis, or we have reports of myocarditis from all these people, then it might actually be like connected. But it also may very well not be the case that everything that is reported is actually attributable to the vaccine. Important to note. However, also worth noting that, the same can be said of the other 1 million reports in this database, and the fact that it has almost doubled, I think is cause for concern.
It seems like there may be some signals that all is not well, especially if you've been following some of what's been happening on social media with people trying to break the silence and the stigma around adverse events. And I think people are only starting to realize how prevalent this is. So the question that I always want to ask people who are very much in support of this technology is, what should we be looking to make sure that this is safe? Like, what signals are there? What safety rails do we have in place? Because historically, we've always looked to these global databases, but we're just throwing that out the window, apparently. No one is paying attention to the excess deaths yet. And on top of that, the personal stories that are cropping up everywhere, like they're anecdotal, so it's easy to dismiss. So where can we look to for certainty that something isn't going wrong? And it seems like, people don't even want to entertain that possibility, because honestly, it's scary. To me, it is way scarier than the virus ever was. For people who have already bought into this hook, line, and sinker, they're very unlikely to question that belief at this point, unless something awful happens, God forbid. And so it's much easier for people of that mindset to simply censor ideas and concerns that contradict the narrative, right? It's just branded as misinformation and scrubbed from social media. And we saw this all throughout the pandemic. For example, remember when the hashtag natural immunity was literally banned? And they did this because at that time, there were studies starting to come out of both Israel and Sweden that were basically comparing the efficacy of natural immunity versus different doses of the vaccine. And it wasn't like it was conclusively saying that natural immunity was better either. It was just talking about some of the long-term considerations and how this measured up against certain dosages of the vaccine. And they didn't want people getting access to that information. They didn't want the plebs making informed decisions, I guess. And so they just basically hid it as best they were able to from social media, which is where most people are getting their information. To be honest with you, I find it really disconcerting that we are
discouraged from reading things like this, that we are not encouraged really to do our own research, right? That's like it's like a taboo thing. Like you're one of those do your own research people. And it's certainly taboo to try to have a conversation about this. If you try to discuss this with people, you really do run the risk of being branded a conspiracy theorist, as you run the risk of being shamed, vilified, cast out from the tribe. And to me, again, this is like one of those things where why doesn't that ring the alarm bells for more people? Like that should be a huge red flag to anyone who's paying attention. The powers that be are insisting that these technologies are safe and effective while also censoring anything that suggests otherwise. And like why at this point? Everyone is getting COVID. And if the numbers in the databases are to be believed, then there are an unprecedented number of adverse events associated with these vaccines. By hiding that from us, that's like asking us to play Russian roulette with our health while also promising us that there's no bullets in the gun.
Oh, no, it's not like a gun. It's not like a gun. It's like a box of chocolates. You just don't know what you're gonna get. Is it stroke, blood clots, myocarditis, miscarriage, sudden adult death syndrome?
I don't see immunity in here. I know people who I suspect may be being affected by this. Someone who went blind moments after receiving the vaccine and their doctor told them that it was completely unrelated. I know someone who got blood clots after their booster. I know a handful of people who developed heart attacks who were previously healthy and then they got either heart attacks or strokes or myocarditis. And I know a 20-something who dropped dead of a heart attack and another 20-something who developed aggressive cancer. And to be fair, correlation does not equal causation. It could just be a coincidence that there's all these sick people within a degree or two of me. But maybe I'm just bad luck, honestly. But if I take that, what I'm observing around me, and I combine it with the data in those databases and the fact that we're not allowed to talk about these things, like I'm really just left with a lot of questions. 1, if this is safe, why would the FDA want to seal Pfizer clinical data for 75 years? Keep in mind that drug regulators are funded by the drug companies that they're supposed to be regulating, which is a massive conflict of interest, and I, to be honest, don't understand how it's legal. 2, with all these databases showing a massive influx of adverse reaction and death, why isn't that being addressed by these global entities who claim to be the stewards of our health? 3, did the FDA know this was going to happen? Because they published infamous slide 16 on their website 2 weeks before rollout. And it also includes most of the top reported AEs or adverse events. I'll put that link in the description. 4, and this is the one that honest to God makes me want to cry myself to sleep at night. Why are we putting this in children who have a 99.99% survival rate? Like why? I feel like there's no answer for that other than money, honey. When I take all of this together, it leads me to believe, and it's just a belief, okay, I'm not saying it's the truth, but it leads me to believe that the benefits of these have been way overemphasized and their potential drawbacks, which can even be debilitating or deadly, have been way underplayed. And we don't even know about the long term, right? There is no long-term safety data. We are the long-term safety data. And if we're not even willing to address this in the short term because people are afraid, I think that's really what it boils down to. People don't want to see it, so they have their blinders on. Then this cycle is just going to continue. And we're just not going to do ourselves any services in the long run. I think that it's dangerous to write this off as a conspiracy theory because what if something has gone horribly wrong and no one is willing to investigate it? As far as I'm concerned, the grain of truth in the depopulation agenda is that these entities don't give a fuck about any of us. If the AE data is to be believed, if there's anything to that, they don't care. They don't care. We can die in droves and their revenue is going to skyrocket anyway. And that's a fair deal to them. That's a done bargain, my dude. And it sounds harsh, but people seem to forget that the pharmaceutical industries at the forefront of this have paid some of the largest criminal fines in history. They are infamously dishonest. They have a practice, a long track record, right, of manipulating
clinical data and bribing doctors. They have a history of experimenting on Black and brown bodies, and they are known to promote products that either don't work or destroy people's health. Again, all because money. And that's what this boils down to is I am not sure. I'm not convinced that this has ever been about health. I think it has always been about money and control. And I know more and more people are waking up to the fact that something isn't quite right in all of this, but the wake up is like so agonizingly slow. I'm like, how many times do these entities, these governments and these corporations get to lie to us before we realize that they're lying? How many times does the system get to drag its ballsack across our face before we realize that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes? It's like right in front of our eyes. It's grazing our eyelids and we still can't see it. And I still see so many intelligent people, especially the ones with these big, kind, beautiful, trusting hearts that won't even entertain the idea that we're being lied to. And honestly, I'm scared for them because fall is rolling around and there's going to be a big push and a lot of social pressure to go get that fourth thing of this. And I feel like a lot of people either think it's a good idea or they buckle under the pressure. I know a lot of people who didn't actually want to get it, but they felt like they had to. And I'm concerned because, you know, the injuries and the deaths appear to be dose dependent. Basically, the more that you inject this stuff into your body, the more of a chance that you are going to be the one to have the unlucky draw. And I have to like remind myself that, okay, like not everyone who goes and gets this is gonna, you know, have something bad happen or die or whatever. But you just never know. You know what I mean? And on top of that, we don't know about the long term. And it's hard because like I can't have these conversations in real life with people because it's really not my place. And it's also like I know that nothing I say is going to affect someone's mindset on this if they're just kind of locked in that this is the right thing to do. And it sucks because like the last thing I want to do is watch and do nothing, especially if something bad happens, but it's all I can do, you know, and pray, which is what I do. It literally reminds me of like watching a friend in an abusive relationship and they don't realize that it is abusive. Like their partner is gaslighting them and coercing them and manipulating them, and they have no idea for as long as they're in it. And if you've ever had that experience, you know that like doesn't matter how much you love your friend, it doesn't matter the things you point out to them or like the evidence that you have, they like literally can't see it. They'll just parrot back what their partner tells them. They may even lash out at you and there's nothing you can do. They literally can't see it until they are out of that relationship. I think it's really awful that it's so much easier to lie to people than to help them realize they have been lied to. But I also understand it. I think that when people have bought into something hook, line, and sinker, it's almost like this veil of cognitive dissonance where they can't even entertain the idea that they were misled, because honestly, like it's frightening. It's frightening to realize that maybe these entities haven't been entirely honest and that as a result, we have jeopardized our health in some shape, way, or form. And man, I just keep hoping that like this is some weird fucking fever dream and we're going to wake up and it's going to be 2019 and normal again. But for those of you who've been asking where I've been, first of all, thank you. I'm really grateful. And I was like surprised and touched, and like people like noticed and cared. So thank you. And yeah, I've just needed to step away from this because I'm finding what's happening in the world really overwhelming right now. And especially knowing people who are affected by it. Even if like a fraction of those numbers are true, we're looking at like a big problem. And if those numbers are true, or if they're the tip of the iceberg, we could be looking at crimes against humanity. And the fact that that's happening is frightening. But actually what scares me the most is that I know so many people who I love and respect, and they can't see it. And they can't see it. And that to me, it makes me feel like being trapped in a nightmare, or the only way to wake up is for other people to wake up, and you're the only one who's lucid. In any case, Thank you for joining me on Idea Sex today. I don't know how consistent I'm going to be, just to be honest with you guys, but felt good to at least hop on and do something. So I would love to have Idea Sex with you in the comments, as always. Would love to know what you think is going on. I don't know. I'm just an internet idiot, but whatever you believe, I hope you stay healthy. I hope you stay happy, and I hope you are very, 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 very blessed.